Let me introduce someone that has fought for us time and again. He is the guru on environmentalism here in this nation. There's nobody, I'm convinced, that knows more about environmental change and what we need to do here in America to ensure that the environment is one that we cherish and that we ensure is there not just for us, but it's there for all of our children. And I know if we heed the words of this man, that'll exist for our children and generations to come. Brothers and sisters, Bobby Kennedy Jr.
Thank Arturo for that introduction. I want to thank all of you for being here today. I have a long relationship with Arturo, and as most of you know, Arturo is the son-in-law of Cesar Chavez and the heir to his legacy, as well as the president of the union that he created. And when my father decided to run for president in 1968, he first went out there in 1966 and held hearings when nobody else wanted to do it, and he really fell in love with Cesar and what he was doing, because he could see he was dealing, everybody turned their cell phones off, please. But then in 1968, when my father had already decided to run for president, but he only told a couple of members of his staff, Cesar had asked him, was ending a fast, and had asked him to come out there. And his staff, I had warned him at that time, don't go see Cesar Chavez, because many people in California were frightened of the farm workers, and they thought it was a communist organization, and that it was revolutionary. And my father said, and he said, it will alienate a lot of the Anglos in the state that you need to win. My father said, I don't care, I really like Cesar, that's what he said. And he went out there, and Cesar was one of the first people that, he was the first person outside of his immediate staff that he informed that he was going to run for president. And he won the state of California largely because of the efforts of the farm workers, the extraordinary organization and the turnout that they gave, which they had never done before. And in many places around the country, Hispanics didn't vote. And even in this state, 4 years ago, there were 40,000 Hispanics who didn't vote. We can't afford that now. It's just the most important election of our lives. We can't afford 4 more years of these people in the White House. We need to get everybody else to vote. I've worked on a lot of these issues, and I had my other son, I have Connor here with me. My other son. My other son, Aiden, was supposed to be here with me, but he's not. And he's 7 years old. And I represented the people of Vieques in a lawsuit against the United States Navy 7 years ago. We had a crooked judge who wouldn't hear the case, and finally that 10,000 people lived on the island, the highest cancer rate in the Caribbean, the highest infant mortality rate, the highest overall mortality rate, the lowest employment rate in Puerto Rico because of the bombs that are being rained down on them every day. I finally said to him, okay, they asked me, well, will you do a civil disobedience? And I said, well, my wife is pregnant, and how long do you think I'll be in jail for? Because I said, it's just like 3 days or something. But they put me in jail for 34 days, and as a result, I missed my son being born. But then the first time I saw him was when they brought him to me. My wife brought him to me in prison when I was 2 weeks old. And we named him Aiden Vieques Kennedy, and he really wanted to be here today. I love this state. I've always, since I was a little boy, loved New Mexico. And when I was 11 years old, I decided to write a book on the environment. And my father arranged that I could interview the Secretary of Interior, who was then Stuart Udall. He was a native, and most people don't know this, but if my father loved Stuart Udall, and if he had got the nomination in 1968, he almost certainly would have chosen Stuart Udall as his vice president. That was his choice. And we were out, Arturo and I and George Lopez were out yesterday campaigning for Mark Udall in Colorado, who's just taking the worst beating that I've ever seen anybody take. He said the ads are so bad, I mean, against him, and so it's just this typical, like, really ugly Republican poison, all dishonest. You know, this great man. And he said that he felt good that he had early voted because after hearing all these things about himself, that he wouldn't even vote for himself if he had waited. So, anyway, you know, the issue, you guys all know the issues in this election. Well, one of them that we don't talk much about is health care, but it's so important. And you know, the more I see, we spoke to a man in Las Vegas this morning, Las Vegas, New Mexico, was on a respirator. 2 years ago, he let his insurance lapse, and 4 months later, because he couldn't afford it anymore, and 4 months later he was diagnosed with cancer. And within 1 month, he had exhausted his life savings, had to sell his house, exhausted everything he had. And now he can get Medicare because he qualifies because he's poverty stricken. But we shouldn't do that to Americans. You know, that's unacceptable in this country. We're the wealthiest still, despite, you know, George Bush, we're still the wealthiest country in the world. And we're the only industrialized nation in the world where somebody like that gentleman we saw can work their entire lives, give their sweat and blood to this nation, work till retirement, pay taxes, and then at the end of that time, contract an illness, and after a month, lose their entire life savings. We're the only industrialized nation in the world where parents can sit in a living room and listen to their baby, their infant, crying in the room next door, and have to wonder whether that baby is $50 sick or $100 sick or $500 sick before they bring them to a hospital. And we shouldn't be like that. We're a humane nation. We're supposed to be an exemplary nation. And Barack Obama is going to make us an exemplary nation again. On the issue of energy,